The city of Jerusalem is not mentioned by name. The Torah almost always says, to the place that I will show you, or to the place that I will bring you. Welcome back to another edition of 7 and 7, where we'll explore this week's Torah portion, which consists of 7 readings in just about 7 minutes and 7 lessons. This week's Torah portion is Parsha Rabbi, which means to see. And it starts off with Moses telling the Jewish people that they should see that he places before them 2 options, the option of blessing and the option of curses. And he explains that if the Jewish people choose the path that goes in the way of God, the way that God wants them to, and they adhere to the mitzvahs, they'll be blessed. Otherwise, they'll be cursed. The exact process of these blessings and these curses won't happen for another few weeks, but Moses gives them the general outline that it's going to take place on Mount Avel and Mount Gerizim. Another thing that Moses tells the Jewish people is when they come to the land of Israel, they should destroy all the idol worship that they will encounter there. And he tells them that when they come to Israel and God will show them where the altar is, they can only bring sacrifices at that location, at that altar, and they're forbidden from bringing sacrifices anywhere else. Jewish mysticism focuses on this word Ra'eh, the first word of the Torah portion, which means to see. And they offer perhaps a deeper explanation, and that is that if we look, we can see that not only are blessings, but often the curses are blessings also. And if we look at life, that the challenges are often an opportunity for us to grow and to really find the goodness that will really be transforming, and we can really change how the curse presents itself and what it really is. And so Moses is really blessing the Jewish people with the ability to really see. The second reading tells us that although it's forbidden for the Jewish people to offer sacrifices anywhere besides the altar, if it's something that's not a sacrifice, they just want to eat some meat, they want to have a barbecue, whatever it is, it's permitted for them to slaughter that anywhere as long as it's slaughtered in a kosher way, and the blood of the animal is always forbidden for them. Then the Torah adds that there are certain tithes and certain gifts that have to be brought to Jerusalem every year or every few years, and that also has to be consumed in Jerusalem, and it's restricted to just that holy city. It's interesting to note that the city of Jerusalem is not mentioned by name. The Torah almost always says, to the place that I will show you, or to the place that I will bring you. And of course, that's Jerusalem. But the scholars and commentaries all ask, why is it that the city goes unnamed? Why is it that the Jewish people perhaps didn't even know where that city would be? And Maimonides offers 3 interesting explanations. If you remember, we read a few weeks ago that Israel was split into 12 sections. So what that means is that Jerusalem would be in only one of the sections or maybe in 2 sections, but the Temple Mount would certainly have to be in one of the sections. And that could possibly lead to infighting between the Jewish people, each one wanting to have the ability to host the Temple Mount in their property. For that reason, God didn't disclose that location so that there should be peace amongst the nations. And here's a powerful lesson about the idea of peace, that in some sense it's worthy to push off or not disclose the location of where Jerusalem is, even though that's obviously a very important piece of information, because our single greatest achievement and accomplishment and goal is peace amongst the Jewish people, and that comes at the expense of all else. The third reading tells us the laws of idol worship, and Moses warns them that they shouldn't be enticed or seduced to follow the ways of the people around them, and they should stay loyal to God. They're not allowed to add to any of the mitzvahs, and they're not allowed to take away from any of the mitzvahs. And some of the laws of idol worship that are mentioned are the laws of a prophet who's an established prophet and tries to convince the Jewish people to follow him in the ways of idol worship, and an individual who tries to entice another Jew to follow the ways of idol worship, and the laws of an entire city that starts to worship idols, and all of those are punished by death, and the various laws and details are enumerated in the third reading. As I mentioned, the Torah says you cannot add and you cannot subtract, and you need to keep all of the mitzvahs, the entire mitzvah, everything that I command you. And the commentaries point out that the word everything that I command you means that even ones that you think may be less significant, we're instructed to keep those mitzvahs as well. Not just the ones that seem to be exciting and earth-shattering and we feel like we're accomplishing something, but even things that are quote unquote insignificant, those have to be kept and adhered to as well. And the reality is that we don't really know what's a bigger mitzvah, what's a greater mitzvah, and what's not. Fourth reading, the Torah tells us, "Banim atem la'Hashem Elokechem," we're God's children. Which, by the way, obviously there's a lesson there just in those words, and that is just as a father or a parent punishes their child, and it's for the best of their child, and they really don't mean it in a bad way, God forbid. They're only there to educate the child and to help show them the right way. And the same is true when we suffer or when we feel like God is punishing us, quote unquote. That's really a blessing. It's really really God showing us perhaps a message of where we should be changing and what we should be doing better. But God says that since we're God's children, we're not allowed to deface our bodies. So no tattoos or other types of cuttings on the body. And then the Torah talks about the laws of kosher, which animals are kosher, which fish are kosher, which birds are kosher, and some of the signs that accompany a kosher and a non-kosher animal. The Torah also says that it's forbidden to eat meat that was slaughtered improperly, and it's forbidden to eat milk and meat together. The fifth aliyah, the fifth reading, tells us the laws of Maaser Sheni, the second tithe, and that is after you've given the first tithe. There's a second tithe they are obligated to bring and eat in Jerusalem. And the only exception is if somebody has too much, they can exchange it for money and bring that money to Jerusalem, and with that they need to buy some food. The Torah also talks about this 3-year tithing cycle. At the end, at the conclusion of that cycle, we're instructed to burn or destroy anything that hasn't been taken care of. There's an interesting verse in the Aliyah that says that the Levi, the poor person, has to be given demach soro. They need to be given as much as they need. And from there, the Torah tells us, our sages teach based on this idea that when you give charity, you need to give a respectable amount. And therefore, when a poor person is given a gift, they need to be given an amount that's actually going to help sustain them. So the mitzvah of tzedakah, the mitzvah of charity, is not just about giving a few cents, but if you're in a position, the mitzvah of tzedakah for you might be really to give somebody an entire meal, or to really help them in a way that's going to be truly meaningful. And if you're in a position to do that and you don't do that, perhaps you haven't really fulfilled the mitzvah of tzedakah, the mitzvah of charity. The sixth reading, Moses instructs the Jewish people that every 7th year is the laws of Shemitah. They need to forgive their loans, and they shouldn't be scared to give a loan even if it's coming close to the year of Shemitah. And the Torah also elaborates on the laws of charity. One of the words that the Torah says is if there's going to be a poor person, bisha'arecha, which means in your gates or in your cities. And all the commentaries point out that there's a powerful lesson here, and that is that the laws of charity apply first and foremost to the people in our own city, or to the people in our own family. And so while it's important to give to charity and to support all kinds of institutions, but always remember that your local institution, your local synagogue, your local Jewish day school should be the primary recipient of your charity, and perhaps other charities should be second in line. The seventh and final reading tells us the laws of the Bachor, of the laws that apply to a firstborn animal, and whether it has to be brought as a sacrifice, given to the priest as a gift. And then finally the Torah tells us the laws of the 3 main Jewish holidays, which are Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. We're instructed to go visit God, and we're instructed to rejoice in those holidays. Commentaries point out that if you read it closely, the Torah only explicitly instructs us to rejoice during Shavuot and Sukkot, but not clearly are we given that instruction on Passover. The reason for that is that although Passover from the Jewish people's perspective is an incredibly joyous holiday, but we have to remember that there were Egyptians who were struggling, who were killed, who drowned at that time, and so therefore, in some sense, if other people are suffering, our joy remains incomplete. And this is, I think, really a powerful lesson in sensitivity and realizing that even if things are going well for you, look around you and see perhaps you can help somebody else who's not in the same fantastic position as you are. Wishing you a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom.